In this episode, we're going to design the subpage that lists all of the screenshots that have been taken within that paparazzi. Okay, let's see what we want that page to look like. We'll have a simple panel called shot that will display one line for each screenshot that has been taken. We'll also display some pagination at the bottom to mimic what we'll have for real when we will implement that. For each of these screenshot lines, we'll have two buttons, one to download the screenshot and one to delete it. And when the user wants to delete a screenshot, we'll ask them to confirm that action. Okay, so let's implement that. Our base panel is going to be titled Shots. And for our subtitle, we will display the total amount of shots that have been taken. So for that, we'll go to our Paparazzi Show Overview component, and we will copy the subtitle of the first panel right here. And because this list will be paginated, I'm going to add in total just to avoid any ambiguity. Okay, now within that panel, we'll have two things. We'll have the shots, and we'll have the pagination. We'll separate the two by giving this one a margin bottom of 4, and we'll start by listing our shots inside that container. So we'll create a new div, and we'll say v4 shot in paparazzi.shots, and the key will be shot.id. And to see if that works, let's display the date of the shot in there. So vtext shot.created@, and we can see our 6 shots here. Okay, now let's add our download and delete buttons. Let's create a flex container, and we'll create our first base button. We'll make it small, and we'll give it a margin right of 4 to space it from the delete button. Now inside we can write download, and that works, but it could look a little bit better with an icon. So let's add one base icon, and we'll use an icon called cloud download. And let's remember to give it a fill current, a width, let's say, of 4, and a margin right of 2 to separate it from the text. Finally, we'll make its primary part a little bit lighter by giving it text gray 600. Now we'll do exactly the same for the delete button, except that we will use the trash icon, and it will be called delete. And also we won't be needing that margin right. Okay, now let's push those buttons on the right side of the text. So we'll make this a flex container. So flex items center, and we'll say justify between, so that the spacing available sits in between the text and the button. So if I save this, we can see that the buttons are now on the right, and we didn't have to specify a flex 1 or a margin left outer or anything like that to do that. Next, for every 2 lines, we'll give it a gray background. So we do that by using odd background gray 100. And if I save this, it's not going to work because we need to activate the odd variant for the background color plugin. So we'll go to our Tailwind config file, and here we'll add a new line called background color. And by default, this is equals to responsive, hover, and focus. So in our case, we want to add odd, but we won't add it here because if we do, the odd variant will have a higher priority than the hover variant. And we don't want that because if in the future we want to hover on top of those odd variants, it won't work. So we need to make sure that the odd variant is set before the hover variant right here. Okay, so now if I save this, we can see that our gray background is being applied only on odd items. Okay, let's go back to our Paparazzi Show Shot page, and we'll add a horizontal padding of 6 and a vertical padding of 2. And because we want that gray background to touch the sides of our panel, we'll remove some margin here horizontally, so -mx6, and that looks much better. Now let's improve the design of those dates a little bit. We'll make them uppercase, which means we have to give them a wider tracking. And we'll make them smaller and bolder. Okay, now I want that when the user clicks on the delete button, we display a little confirmation message that says, are you sure? Yes or no. So to do that, we'll have to keep track of the ID of the shots that we're trying to delete. So we'll create a new data variable down here. And we'll call it deleting shot ID, and it will default to null. Okay, next we can use that deleting shot ID data property all the way up here and say only display that if deleting shot ID is not equals to shot.id. And if it is, then we will display our confirmation message. So right here, we'll say v else, and we'll write our you sure question mark. Now to make this work, we need to add a click listener here. And when they click on delete, then the deleting shot ID becomes the ID of the current shot. So now if I click on delete here, you can see our confirmation message. And if I click on another one, that it moves within that line. Okay, now we'll add our yes or no button next to that are you sure question. So here we'll wrap that in a div. And we'll add a base button that is small and danger for the yes answer. And we'll do the same for the no, except that it won't be a danger button. Now let's make sure they are aligned horizontally, so we'll give this the classes flex and items center. And we'll give these two a margin right of 4 to give it more spacing. Okay, so now our yes button is basically going to make the API call that is going to delete the screenshot for real. But the no button is simply going to close that confirmation message. So we'll add a click listener that sets deleting shot ID back to null. Okay, so now I can toggle the two modes by clicking delete and no. Nice. Okay, now let's move on to the pagination. So we'll have two buttons, one that says newer and one that says older. And we'll align those two buttons by making this a flex container, flex items center. And just like we did with our screenshots rows, we'll use justify between to push them in either side of the panel. Now in the middle, we'll mock a text that will display the current page. So let's say 1 out of 3, and we'll make that text a little bit lighter than the rest. So let's say 600. And because we are pretending to be on the first page, let's make that newer button disabled. Okay, so that's basically our shot subpage done, except that what would happen for that subpage if a paparazzi has no shots at all. So if I go back to /paparazzi to see all of our paparazzis, and I'll scroll down to the one that has no shots. If I go to the shots subpage, then this is a little bit useless, and ideally we would have an empty state that would tell us, hey, create your first shot manually by clicking on this button. So we will deal with empty states in general in the last episode of this module. So in the meantime, all we'll do is create a new panel that says you don't have any shots. So we'll go to our base panel and add a VF. Paparazzi.shot count is greater than 0. Okay, so now if the paparazzi has no shots, let's create a new panel down here with v else. And we'll say no shots and add a lot of vertical padding. Okay, so that doesn't look particularly exciting at the moment, but when we reach the last episode of this module, I promise we'll come back to this and make it look pretty. Okay, so that's it for the shot subpage for now. In the next episode, we will deal with the settings subpage.